Hello. Today, the Chad Daybell trial had a lot of drama in the courtroom, and whoo, I was as nervous as I've ever been. And I'll explain what happened, but I was thinking about when I first started following true crime stories, and that was clear back in the day when O.J. Simpson was on trial. And I still remember the day that OJ tried on the glove and it didn't fit, and there's the whole if the glove doesn't fit, you must acquit. It was basically a prosecution error, in my opinion, that they thought that maybe the glove would. Anyway, that's a whole story in and of itself. He was eventually acquitted, and it felt icky all this time. And as I was watching the Daybell trial today, I started to think, oh, this is feeling kind of like the OJ thing, in that an error on the prosecution's part could literally change the outcome of a trial. And I was thinking, oh, no, 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 don't let this be the case. Don't let Chad get away. And I'm going to explain everything about that and what happened in trial today. So let's get started. Welcome to A Life Without Parole. I'm Amy, and I will say, whoo, there were a few hours of major stress today. Let me explain what happened. I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version. Do people even say that anymore? Reader's Digest? Prosecutors rested their case. They are done with all their witnesses, they're done with all their testimony, they're done with everything, and they rested their case for Chad Daybell. What does that mean? Well, that means they turn over and they say, we're done, right? And now it's the defense's turn to come back and give their witnesses and explain why everything that they've said isn't true or whatever, to defend Chad Daybell. Now, as I was listening to the final witness today, I was thinking, oh man, between yesterday and today, I just felt like slam dunk. I can't think of a way that the defense could come back again and try to combat all this evidence and all these things. Some of it was a little bit going over things that we already knew, but more clarity. And I'm going to give you the whole details on what happened today. But first, let me explain the craziness. After the prosecutors were finished and they rested their case, Judge Boyce brought out there was a mistake in their case, and that is the day that they're claiming that JJ died in the documentation that they filed with the court to make charges against Chad did not match up with the date that their expert witnesses just got through testifying of when JJ was murdered. So in that case, that's a big mistake. That's huge. And the possibility of what that means is crazy. It could be even a mistrial thrown out, you start over, or you can't use that evidence. Basically, because once the state rests, they cannot make amendments. They can't change what they're charging Chad with. And so that was crazy. And you could see that John Pryor and Chad Daybell were thinking, whoa, we just got the biggest gift ever. Because, okay, basically the charges for the other charges, there's a lot of charges, and the other charges would still stand against Tammy, against Tylee, against, conspiracy, the parts about fraud, doing fraud against the government because of the money, all of that would still stand. But the one that wouldn't, if this was to go through, would be the count against Chad murdering JJ. And oh, what a shame that would be, because this whole entire thing started because of Kay and Larry Woodcock asking, where are the children? Where is JJ? That's what started this whole ball rolling. So for them to not get the justice they deserve, potentially, I mean, still innocent until proven guilty, and we still have the defense, but you see what I'm saying. With them not being able to have those charges against Chad for JJ would have been so sad. There still would be, it's complex, but the main charge of first degree murder was in the balance. So basically, the judge let the prosecutors have 2 hours, 2 hours to come back and argue why Chad should still be charged with that count. That also gave the defense, John Pryor, 2 hours to argue why it should be thrown out. Ooh, so for 2 hours, my heart was racing. I can't even imagine what the families and the prosecutors were going through. I mean, I was just looking at the prosecutor's face when it was brought to their attention, and they were just like, what? I mean, throughout the trial, there were many times when someone would say the wrong date, and then they'd be corrected, including John Pryor, prosecutors, witnesses, everybody. But it got corrected on the record, and then they kept moving forward. Nothing was as bad as this. Okay, so I'll tell you what happened. They came back, they argued. It took a while, but they argued why it should be okay. John Pryor argued why it shouldn't. The judge, here's the bottom line. A year ago, the prosecutors amended their charges, and there was some wording that was changed, and the court agreed to it, and the defense agreed to it, and it was all changed. The words were changed, and the charges were changed. They never ever talked about changing the charges about JJ and when the murder occurred. It was correct at that time. Then, because of a clerical error, when it was refiled, this time they had Tylee's death date instead of JJ's death date on the documentation. So Judge Boyce said, basically, the prosecution didn't have a right to change it because they would have had to have it approved by him. So it has to go back to the original, which is what everybody wanted anyway. And as far as how they do that, we don't know, but the charges will in fact go forward. And Judge Boyce will explain what that means on Monday, how he's going to do it. But basically, what a relief. The charges stand. So the other thing that we found out today, there will be no court tomorrow. And it was just kind of as a last minute thing. We heard court will start on Monday. So Pryor has Friday, Saturday, Sunday to get ready for his witnesses. I've heard through the grapevine he has 7 or 8 witnesses. So this case could potentially be wrapping up in the next week or so. So it'll be interesting to see. I've said this before. What will John Pryor have up his sleeve? We're going to find out. But okay. So now that we got that out of the way, let me explain a little bit of what happened today, which I think might have been, between yesterday and today, the 2 best days as far as putting all the pieces together so we have an overview. And so I want to give it to you in a real quick overview. The audio call that was presented yesterday from Chad and Lori's call the day before the children's bodies were found, there was a lot of, words that they used which really meant something else. They knew they were being recorded. So they had kind of a cloaked way to say things without saying things. But because of other conversations and texts, we can read between the lines of what they're saying for the most part. And I think it's an interesting thing. I'm going to do a whole video on that because that's going to be an hour-long video, and I will have that one in the future. But I just want to give the recap of all the main topics today. The one thing that we found one of the main reasons why the investigators dug where they did on Chad's property was because the grass looked different. All the other things that they had, they knew they were on the property, all those other things, but also the grass looks different after you bury a body. Now, I know that this is one thing that Chad Daybell's children have said in previous interviews. Basically, our dad was a sexton. He buried people for a living. So he wouldn't have done something as dumb as to bury him that way. So it couldn't have been him. That's their argument. But I say, well, that's not really true because he was burying people who were in caskets. He would dig out with a backhoe, chisel it out with a shovel, put a casket in, bury it over. That's not going to change the grass above. But when you bury a body, and even if you put rocks and plywood and everything, as it decomposes, the ground starts to sink. And also, the grass above changes colors. So he wasn't as smart as he thought he was. Also, we learned in that video, which I'm going to do the whole phone call later. But they obviously thought there was only a 3% chance that basically they would get caught, that anybody would do anything. So they thought they were above it. They really got sloppy. And according to Chad, the second coming was going to be here. There was going to be so much destruction, no one would be able to worry about 2 dead children and a dead wife. So he taught. Well, that didn't happen. I was thinking about how we learned yesterday that the last known time to see Tylee was when they went on their trip to Yellowstone. And I talked about this yesterday, that why did they go on that final trip? If they thought she was a zombie, why would they go on vacation? And I started to think, I wonder if they were trying to find an easy spot to bury the children, possibly in Yellowstone. And they were doing a scouting trip. This is just my own guess. And I think that they probably went. I don't know how many of you have been to Yellowstone, but there's actually quite a bit of traffic. You can't really get to places easily where no one's going to see you digging and whatever. So they must have decided against it, and that's when Chad's property was decided upon. That's a theory. I'm just my own little thought, but let's keep going. One thing that we learned from the investigator today, on June 9th, the Daybell children were asked to come in so that the investigators could interrogate them. Not interrogate, could talk to them, get their statements, find out what they knew and when they knew it. And they agreed to it. But then they talked to their dad and changed their minds. And then after that, the children never would help with the investigation at all. This is something that I've brought up previously, and I think this is going to be interesting to see what they have to say on the witness stand. It's just something that makes you go, The other thing that was brought out today, we've seen it bits and pieces here or there, but the fact that it was all tied together, and that was those text messages between Chad and Lori talking about death percentages. And every single time the death percentages got to a certain point, those are the people that died. It's pretty clear. I can't see how any juror wouldn't be able to see what that means, is my guess. One thing that I have speculated about from day one, and that is the fact that Melanie Boudreau Pulowski had 2 children that were deemed dark by Chad as well. And those children were meant to die. One of the texts is that Lori saying Melanie's having a hard time with it, but she understands it. So basically, she was buying in. Again, I'm doing a deep dive on that, hopefully in the next couple of days, but that's sketchy. That's sketchy. Melanie's children were also in danger. One thing that's interesting in these text messages is Lori's reasoning for why she thinks people are zombies. for instance, Tylee and JJ. She says Tylee is a zombie because she was being nice today. She cleaned her room. That's not her personality. So obviously, it's not really her. It's a zombie. So Tylee's a zombie because she's being too nice and too helpful. Then she switches over to JJ's a zombie because he sat and watched a movie and ate and didn't give her any trouble. That's not his personality, so he has to be a zombie. But she also decides that he's a zombie based on Melanie and David Warwick. Melanie Gibb and David Warwick, who witnessed the night before he died. And she says he's a zombie because he was knocking over things, climbing up on the thing. So basically, bad behavior in that case showed that he was a zombie. Looks to me like she just didn't want them. She wanted them deemed zombies so things would happen. I think it's interesting. One of the text messages talks about Chad was talking about how he has a neighbor who was deemed dark and then they prayed over him and whatever. Anyway, he died. And I couldn't help but think to myself, where was Chad when he died? Is that another murder or am I just like losing my mind? But who knows? You can't put anything past him. Okay, so I have all the text messages, the whole stream that happened today, and it's very hard to see them based on the low quality of video that the court has, but I still put them all together. I did screenshots of them all, and I put it all together if you ever want to try to read them and see them word for word what they are. And basically, I'll put them in here, and if you want to see it, you can stop the video and just see if you can read it. I mean, like I say, it's not high quality, but it is an interesting thing. But I think one of the things that was brought out today was a picture of Chad and a picture of Alex. And basically, he's texting it to Lori to say that they're exalted beings. And here we go again. They think they're exalted, they're above the law, they get to do what they want. It's interesting. I can tell that one of Pryor's big defenses is to say that Lori was manipulating Chad. And I do think she did manipulate him as he manipulated her. They were the perfect storm. Either one could have thought to themselves, this is wrong, and got out. But neither one did. They were like a gas and a match. And when they are together, it's ignited. And that seems to me what was happening with these two. I think it's going to be interesting. I'm going to do a deep dive into Melanie. I've done a few, but I still think we found a few more things, and I want to tie all the pieces together, her stories, her lies, what we actually know, and the fact that those children, her children, at least two of them, were really close to dying. I'm going to show a video of that too. So don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this out, and I will see you as soon as I can. See ya.